Hello, this is Lisa, CEO of Sight for White and indeed White Sense, welcoming you to this week's Talking News on Friday, the 12th of January 2024. I am delighted to say that all of the groups have reopened for 2024. This week we had swimming at Medina on Monday, yoga at Millbrook House on Tuesday, the coffee morning here at Millbrook House on Wednesday, our Mix and Mingle group on Thursday, and on Friday it was lovely to see a lot of the regular readers back for our Talking News. Perhaps this year Santa bought you some tech and you may need some help with accessibility features. Sam is always on hand. Give us a call, make an appointment, and Sam can offer one-to-one help for tablets, PCs, phones or any other gadgets that you have. So please don't hesitate to call on 522205 for one-to-one tech support. Also this week we have been busy collating the newsletter which will be going out at the end of the month. As always, the newsletter is written by our members for our members, so if you ever have any tips or articles you wish to include, please don't hesitate to give us a call and we can include them for you. Included in this issue is forward planning. We've got lots of save the dates for you, including our White Sense feedback and chat, our Sight for White feedback and chat, our open day planned for September, our summer lunch in May, our AGM in July, and even planned ahead is our mulled wine and mince pies and raffle for next December. So please do read the newsletter for all of this information. If you would like the newsletter in a different format, please never hesitate to get in touch. We can offer this in Braille, PDF, plain Word, audio, QR code, and the large print version. So please don't hesitate to ask if you would like it in a different way. Wishing everybody a very happy new year, Lisa.
Here is this week's charity news for the 12th of January 2024. Monday, swimming is at Medina between 1:15 and 2:15 p.m. We have the whole use of the pool and the cost is £6. Transport is available if required. This is for people who want to swim lanes or just for gentle exercise in the water. Yoga is on Tuesday at Millbrook House between 1:45 p.m. and 2:45 p.m. The cost is £4 and include refreshments. Our weekly coffee and chat resumes on Wednesday at Millbrook House between 10 a.m. and 11:30 a.m. The cost is £2, which include coffee and cake. Staff are always on hand to help with any enquiries, and equipment will be available to try out. Thursday is Mix and Mingle. This group meets between 10:30 a.m. and 2 p.m. Booking for this group is essential, and at the moment there is a waiting list for people to join. We are now looking for knitters to start knitting our Easter items. So if you know anyone who knits and would like something to do during these cold winter days, please let Susan know and she will send out patterns, etc. We also have a limited amount of wool available. Also, if anyone knows a company who would be willing to donate a few cream eggs to help with the fundraising, Susan would love to hear. If you would like to join any activity or want more details, please call the office on 52205.
This is Alison reading an article from Isle of Wight Radio entitled Fort Victoria Pier Development Refused. Major redevelopment plans to restore a dilapidated pier and to build houses on a popular Isle of Wight beach have been refused. The Isle of Wight Council has turned down property design company Miles Blameyer's proposals to restore the pier at Fort Victoria and establish an oyster nursery and shellfish processing building with a food serving hatch. The authority also refused permission for 5 4-bed houses on the foreshore, which would have been elevated over the shingle. Isle of Wight Council planning officers called the development an intrusion into an open space and said it would create urban sprawl. Publishing its decision, the authority said it would fail to preserve the existing character of the area and would constitute an undesirable form of development. It said the Grade 2 listed Fort Victoria should remain the most prominent building on its shoreline, and what was proposed would dominate the view from the seaward side. The land is open, tranquil and largely undeveloped, the council said, which would change with the development, giving the perception that the beach was off limits due to private housing. The authority said rather than improving access to the coast, the development would discourage the use of the section of the beach. The council also argued the development would be in an unsustainable location, unconnected to transport options and away from services and facilities. The development was also deemed unacceptable in flood risk terms, and the Isle of Wight Council said there are alternative and preferable locations for housing. Plans were first submitted in April 2022 and were scaled back in August 2023. Both sets of plans received more than 150 letters of objection from residents. If the developer wishes to, it can appeal the council's decision to the Planning Inspectorate.
This is Brian reading an article from the Island Echo. Difficult decisions ahead, says council leader over lack of extra government cash. The leader of the Isle of Wight Council has expressed his disappointment with the draft Local Government Finance Settlement, LGFS, for the island, with a lack of extra cash, meaning difficult decisions lay ahead. Despite months of work to provide evidence of extra costs of at least £6 million a year to provide services on the island, there is nothing extra for the local authority in the draft settlement. In fact, the island has received the lowest percentage increase of all unitary authorities. Councillor Phil Jordan has said, "The settlement for the Isle of Wight across all funding areas was £400,000 worse than we had estimated when our forecast for 2024-25 was prepared this time last year. In spite of government confirming they understood the island has a proven case for improved special funding, the so-called island deal, they have failed to recognise that with any additional funding. We're deeply concerned that the increased funding for social care is significantly lower than the cost pressures that the council will face next year in those services. The public services that our residents want and need are still struggling with the past impact of years of government-driven austerity. Demand is massive and growing. Costs have risen. Inflation is still higher than it should be, and these factors result in pressure on all of our council services. The settlement is simply not sufficient to meet the cost pressures we are facing. As last year, the government is assuming council will raise council tax by the full allowed amount as a way of solving the crisis in adult social care. This crisis has been developing for years and, in my view, needs a national government-led solution, but instead, the government is expecting our residents to pay additional money to prevent this social care crisis from getting worse. As a council, we remain fully committed to ensuring the best start in life for children and young people, providing adult social care for our older or more vulnerable residents, ensuring a safe, clean environment, maintaining our many parks, beaches and public spaces, collecting your waste and maintaining a safe road system. We'll be studying the provisional settlement in more detail over the coming weeks to fully understand the implications for the services we provide. At the same time, we'll also be making the strongest possible representations to the government once again about this very disappointing settlement for island residents. The Council has a statutory duty to set a balanced budget and must do so through finding savings and efficiencies, increasing charges for services, increases in council tax, or by reducing or cutting services. There's a lot of work to be done and understandably some difficult decisions to be made. It's not too late for islanders to have their say on how the Council should spend its money this year by taking part in the annual budget consultation. The Council would like to hear from as many people as possible about what is important to them. Councillor Jordan added, "Consultation is a vital way for residents to have their voice heard during the budget setting process. As we plan our spending for the year ahead, we need to hear your views on our council tax proposals and whether we are prioritising resources in the right areas. Councillors are elected to take decisions, and sometimes they are difficult ones. But as a council, we'll be looking carefully at what you say, but we won't know what you think unless you take part." Islanders can complete the survey on the Council's website. The survey will close on Friday, the 26th of January 2024.
This is Chris, reading an article from Isle of Wight Radio. Round-the-clock deliveries for awful neighbour, Newport Sainsbury's given go-ahead. Round-the-clock deliveries to the main Isle of Wight Sainsbury's store in Newport have been given the go-ahead after an appeal, despite it being branded an awful neighbour by its neighbours. The supermarket had requested the change so it could ensure stocked shelves. In February 2023, the Isle of Wight Council turned down the request. Concerns were raised by the authority that the late-night deliveries would result in noise disturbance and have serious and adverse effects on locals' health and quality of life. The supermarket giant appealed the council's decision to the government's planning inspectorate, and in December, the refusal was overturned. The ruling saw new conditions added, including no more than one delivery between 11 p.m. and 5:30 a.m. on a single day, in the interests of the living conditions of neighbours. Home delivery vehicles will not be allowed into the service yard between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. In its report, the inspectorate acknowledged the strength of objection, but said problems did not solely relate to overnight deliveries. Rather, light pollution and antisocial behaviour in the car park. An inspector from the government body visited Fox's Road store, noting it was a busy route, and reported it would be reasonable to infer there would be significant levels of traffic noise for much of the day. One resident, who has lived opposite the store for more than 10 years, said the deliveries had been a constant annoyance, with massive lorries running at all times of the day and night. In its appeal, Sainsbury's said it would enforce a management plan, engage with residents, install insulation around doors to limit noise emissions, and provide contact details so staff can be reached when there is an issue. Concluding there would be no adverse impact, the inspectorate highlighted a lack of previous official complaints about the 24-hour deliveries, which had been temporarily allowed during the COVID-19 pandemic. And can Brian and I wish you all a very happy new year, and a healthy one too, and hopefully a warm one.
This is an article from the Island Echo read by Terry. Island MP Bob Seeley leading plans to list pub in Hulverstone as community asset. Plans have been launched to list Hulverstone's Sun Inn as a community asset, local MP Bob Seeley has announced. MP Seeley says he is keen to get the Sun Inn listed as an asset of community value to secure its future and make it more difficult for anyone to turn it into a house. The country pub, situated in the hamlet of Hulverstone, was put on the local property market at the start of December last year. Island MP Bob Seeley has said, "I believe there is strong local support for such a measure. The formal request for listing as an asset of community value has to come from an organisation or the parish council." Councillor John Nicholson, the island head of the Campaign for Real Ale, known as CAMRA, has kindly offered to request if need be, but I am asking firstly Bryston Parish Council, as the elected body, to do so. I have offered to write the justification which will need to accompany the request. We are not legally obliged to present a petition, but a local show of support for the Sun Inn campaign will strengthen our case with the Isle of Wight Council, which will need to agree the bid. I've spoken to the Chief Executive of the Isle of Wight Council, and the Council is now expecting the request. I have also spoken to Brook Councillor Roy Haviland, and he has promised to speak to the committee of Seeley Hall in Brook to see if they would also be supportive. I also spoke with Hulverstone and Brook residents. I and others strongly believe that the pub should be a viable and popular business.
This is Alison reading an article from Isle of Wight Radio entitled Shanklin Performing Arts Centre Plans Submitted. Plans have officially been submitted for a modern performing arts and heritage centre on the Isle of Wight. Harvey Wright Architects, on behalf of Shanklin Theatre and Community Trust, has unveiled plans for a new public building on Victoria Avenue, with a modern twist of materials and finishes, and designed to deliberately stand out and be noticed and talked about. In planning documents submitted to the Isle of Wight Council, the architects say, like the design of other museums and performing arts centres across the world, standing out should be celebrated. The proposals could see built a 100-plus capacity auditorium with retractable seating, 3 dance studios and museum gallery space. It would provide training, development and rehearsal facilities for the performing arts, the plans say, which do not necessarily suit the scale of Shanklin Theatre around the corner. A public consultation held at the end of last year saw 79% of those who attended support the plans for a destination building of architectural interest. If the plans are approved, documents say 5 part-time jobs could be created. To build the centre, a nearly 150-year-old former school and fire station building would need to be demolished. It was built in the late 1800s and was previously a school and fire station, before most recently a community library, which closed around 2019. The building is not listed and has been excessively altered over time and poorly maintained, plans say. Reports say it would not be cost-effective to repair the buildings on Victoria Avenue, as there is asbestos present, the roof would require strengthening, some of the rafters are beginning to decay, and the ceiling joists above the library area are sagging. Some aspects of the original building could be saved during the demolition work. You can view the plans on the Isle of Wight Council's planning register. Comments can be submitted until February the 2nd. There is already one objection from a Shanklin resident who says while they support the use of the building, the design is not suitable.
This is Brian reading an item from Isle of Wight Radio. Ryde Town Council working to improve beach accessibility. Ryde Town Council, RTC, is working with a number of partners on a major project to enhance accessibility for all at Ryde Beach. One of these, Unlimited Island and Accessibility Consulting CIC, have actively supported the Council in grant applications, promoted initiative across various media channels, and made substantial contributions during consultation events. Ryde Mayor Richard May says, Ryde Town Council is delighted to be working with a dedicated organisation like Unlimited Island on this incredibly important project. Their involvement has significantly elevated the project's visibility and provided valuable insights from frontline users. Unlimited Island's Just Giving page, combined with the generous contributions from Isle of Wight Council, Visit Isle of Wight and RTC, mean that the team are moving closer to achieving the first phase of the plans. Claire Walker, founder of the island's dedicated accessibility guide, Unlimited Island, adds, the importance of having accessible beaches on the island cannot be understated, and I look forward to seeing the beach used by everybody in the near future and working on similar projects around the island to really open it up to both residents and visitors alike. The island has great potential to be accessible in all areas, and I'm proud to be a part of making this happen. Another key partner, Hover Travel, will be hosting a project launch event in spring, which will rally additional support from local businesses, reinforcing confidence in Phase 1 being completed by the summer of 2024. Phase 1 will include the installation of a boardwalk on the sand near the lifeguard station and Marina Beach, and purchase of sand and sea wheelchairs and walkers, and the implementation of a booking system for the equipment. The goal is to have the boardwalk installed in the spring and removed in autumn for storage, and the equipment available for booking during the lifeguard's contractual period throughout the summer.
This is Chris reading an article from the Island Echo. At risk, post offices look set to be saved as parish councils up support. 4 at-risk community-run post offices on the Isle of Wight will be saved from closure if parish councils go ahead with plans to put more taxpayer cash their way. Inflationary pressures and a lack of footfall have seen stores and services in Godshill, Totland, Brading and Wootton lose money in recent years. Since 2011, Community Action Isle of Wight has run the 4 not-for-profit post offices through its trading arm, Island Community Ventures. The charity first took over Godshill when it saved the village store from closure and expanded with outreach services in Totland, Brading and Wootton. To cover its financial losses, the organisation splits the costs with Godshill and Totland Parish Council, which each pay up to £5,000 a year. Now, Mike Bullpitt, the Chief Executive of Community Action Isle of Wight, has reached out to the parish councils to see if each would be willing to pay more, upping its maximum contribution to £7,000. It would share the burden of risk between the bodies, Mr. Bullpitt said. He said it's very difficult to deliver financially viable post office services in rural areas with low population levels, but they are still vital community services, so sharing the cost helps keep them going. Mr. Bullpitt said Community Action was well aware of the financial pressures on parish councils, but if they were unable to commit to more funding, then a decision would have to be made as to whether the post offices can afford to continue. Speaking at a meeting on Monday, the 8th of January, Councillor Alison Child, the chair of Godshill Parish Council, revealed the results of a public consultation on the matter and said the response had been very positive in supporting the service so far. Councillor Child said, "The shops don't want to close down and don't want to be losing money. The only trouble is the footfall has gone down and the prices are quite high. So we need to help them, because once the shop is gone, it is gone and we won't get them back." The parish council is having a meeting with Community Action in the coming days to see if there are ways it can help the store be more successful and incorporate new ideas. Godshill Parish Council agreed on Monday its budget for the year ahead, which includes a 5% precept increase for residents and supports the store and service with up to £7,000. In Totland, the parish council has also drafted a budget which would increase the support for the post office to £7,000 a year. Councillors did wonder whether reducing the hours of the post office would save money, but it was felt it would not help, as the general overheads would still need to be paid.
This is an article from Isle of Wight Radio, read by Terry. Mermaid Atlantic team reaches voyage halfway point. The Mermaid Atlantic team has reached a major milestone on its epic encounter with the waves, having now reached the halfway point in the middle of the Atlantic. Rather than rowing away from La Gomera, they are closer to their destination in Antigua. A change of mindset will hopefully allow them to enjoy the second half of their mission, having had a few blips to date. They celebrated with a mermaid gin and tonic ready-to-drink can in front of a glowing sunset. Occasionally cuddling up for additional warmth, they have remained virtually argument-free despite their continued close proximity, with smiles and laughter exchanged as frequently as sea air is breathed. Here are some of the highlights of the first half of their journey. Starting their journey with their row heading south, rough conditions lead to a broken daggerboard. An emergency flare was deployed on day 3 after the team had a near miss with a tanker in the early hours. Battling rough seas, cool weather, and an unsteady boat made worse by a broken daggerboard. Going solo, their auto helm became out of use, which meant one man was taken out of rowing to hand steer, leaving one to sleep, one to row, and one to steer. A few wounds, such as oar rash and hand blisters. Strong southerly winds forced them to stop and deploy their para-anchor for a few days. A faulty second battery. Seasickness making eating incredibly difficult. A resident bird keeps them company along with a suckerfish on the hull. Flying fish storm the boat at night, leaving a rather smelly deck. Minke whale spotting and dolphins on the horizon. Shift patterns in check and no arguments so far. Beards are coming along nicely, and over 1,500 nautical miles now completed.
This is Brian reading an article from the Island Echo. Floating bridge failings report to be kept under wraps until new plan is ready. A £50,000 report into the failings of floating bridge number 6 has been completed, but is to be kept secret until the council can balance out the report's findings with a forward plan of action, which could include a new electric floating bridge. A 6-month-long investigation into the 2 remaining issues affecting Floating Bridge 6 ended in December. Carried out by 3S Services, the review cost the Isle of Wight Council £47,520. Although the findings have reached County Hall, they will not be published yet and will instead be combined with future plans for the service. Earlier this year, the leader of the Isle of Wight Council said he has hopes for a new electric replacement. In his resolutions for 2024, Councillor Phil Jordan said he wants to be able to announce a new approach to delivering, sustaining and improving the service, which should include a new vessel. He said he's seeking support from industry professionals and engineering experts to bring forward outline suggestions for a service that would need to be electrically powered. Speaking at a meeting on Tuesday, Colin Rowland, the Isle of Wight Council's Community Services Director, said it makes sense to put together both the report into the existing problems and the one into what might happen next. Floating Bridge 6, which was brought into service in 2017, has been plagued with a number of technical issues which have seen it suspended for weeks at a time.
This is Chris reading an article from Isle of Wight Radio. Place Plan public launch provides insight into future of the Bay Area. The town and parish councils of Lake, Sandown and Shanklin, in partnership with the Isle of Wight Council, have formally launched the Bay Area Place Plan at a public meeting in Sandown. The 98-page report comprises 3 main sections: principles and values, spatial strategy and themes and topics, including highlighting potential investment and civic opportunities for the 3 Bay Area communities. It also showcases data and feedback from the 3-day Think Space delivered by Ferrier and Story, which saw residents and local businesses come together to share their visions for the future of the area. The Place Plan sets out its aims and objectives that focus around engagement and empowerment, strategic thinking, economic growth, infrastructure investment, quality of life for residents and visitors, and securing funds. Laura Cansdale, Area and Town Centre Regeneration Programme Manager, said, "We know from experience elsewhere on the island that the place planning approach can help attract investment and deliver positive results for local communities. I'm really looking forward to seeing what we can achieve across Sandown, Lake and Shanklin as we work together on this new place plan." A joint statement from the town and parish councils of Lake, Sandown and Shanklin says, "We're delighted to publish this plan as it reflects extensive feedback from our communities gathered at the public sessions last summer. We particularly like the concept of urban acupuncture, which demonstrates how a network of small interventions can help make a big impact. This plan is a launch pad for the town and parish councils and our communities to work together, to deliver projects, to bring about the changes we want to see.
This is an article from the Island Echo, read by Terry. Delays continue as still no decision made on controversial planning Bible. It could be months before the Isle of Wight's controversial and divisive planning Bible is back for discussion after government changes halted the process. The Isle of Wight Council's draft planning strategy has been in the making for more than 6 years and has cost hundreds of thousands of pounds. It would set housing targets for the island for the next 15 years and was due to be discussed this month, January. Now, pre-Christmas changes to the national planning policy could have implications for the island, it is argued. Leading councillors have opted to pause consideration and seek legal advice about whether or not to plead exceptional circumstances. Speaking at a meeting last week, Councillor Paul Fuller, the Cabinet Member for Planning, said the latest changes reference islands that are not linked to the mainland by a road bridge and have a large demographic of elderly residents. He said the council may be able to apply for exceptional circumstances, but they need to talk with consultants about whether that will affect the proposed housing targets for the island. Under government figures, the island is expected to build 730 houses a year, but the Isle of Wight Council thinks it can argue that figure down to 453 a year. Councillor Fuller said it is a matter the council is currently investigating, but it could take at least 6 weeks before they get the feedback and then share that with councillors. He said, "We have looked at this for many years, and here we are at the 11th hour and things may have changed. So we need to answer a lot of questions about exceptional circumstances." The consultants could say, "We are already suppressing the housing target through special circumstances, and the number may be low enough already." It is still my intention to get the paper considered as soon as possible, as it is a huge milestone that is just getting heavier and weighing me down very much. Council leader, Councillor Phil Jordan, confirmed if the authority does decide to go down the exceptional circumstances route, it would have to start the process again, as it is entirely new and separate from the current draft strategy. He said it may be a minimum of March before a decision is made.
My name is Mary.
My name is Gerard.
News items and sport. Lucky escape in shock battery blaze. And insurance giant is warning us about a jump in customer claims concerning batteries, after an incident on the Isle of Wight saw a pair of headphones explode. Aviva says claims have included a significant house fire started by an e-cigarette being charged with an incompatible charger. Extensive fire damage to a house after an e-bike with a second-hand battery was left charging unattended in the bedroom, and a phone which exploded during charging after getting wet. It said a fire also started in a garage after a faulty charger was used to power up a remote control car. The insurer said one man from the Isle of Wight was at home when his headphones exploded. He told Aviva, "I was charging my headphones next to me on the sofa and without realising, accidentally plugged them in using an incorrect charger. The light didn't illuminate properly, but I still thought they were charging. After about 5 minutes, the headphones started smoking, and within seconds, both the headphones and the battery case exploded. The metal and plastic from the headphones then melted to the sofa and set it ablaze. Luckily, I was able to put the flames out, but I had a shock and have been left with burn hole in my sofa. I dread to think what would have happened if I had been asleep or was not in the property, as there is no doubt the sofa and the house would have gone up in flames." Aviva analysed internal data for fire claims with words such as battery and rechargeable between the start of 2022 and the end of 2023. It found a 7% increase in claims when comparing 2022 with 2023. Hannah Davidson, a senior underwriting manager at Aviva, said, "For the majority of people, devices powered by lithium batteries such as mobile phones, laptops, power tools and e-bikes are safe to use. However, these batteries can present a significant fire risk if the battery fails, is faulty or is charged incorrectly. Likewise, with consumers buying lithium batteries and lithium-powered devices from second-hand retailers or sellers, there is increased potential for batteries to be damaged or faulty on purchase, for the battery in the device to be different to the original, or for the charger supplied with the device to be the incorrect charger."
Sir Ben admits tough call, quitting GB role. Seaview resident Sir Ben Ainsley has announced he is stepping down as driver of the Emirates Great Britain Sail GP team. Ainsley, who won his 4th Olympic gold medal in his final games in London 2012, took over as driver for the GB team in 2019. He went on to win the Sydney Sail GP in October 2021. Ainsley will continue his role as Emirates GBR CEO, but will hand over the wheel to double Olympic gold medalist and America's Cup teammate Giles Scott. Speaking after his final Sail GP event as driver in Dubai, Ainsley said it was time for the next generation to come through. He said the decision to step down was probably the toughest decision I've ever made in my sporting career. In his role as CEO, Ainsley will manage the overall performance of the team, on and off the water. As the CEO of both the Emirates GBR and the INEOS Britannia America's Cup team, and most importantly, being a husband and father at some point, you've got to realize you can't do everything, he explained.
Man in his 40s in glass attack. A man in his 40s has been taken to hospital after a glass bottle attack. Hampshire and Isle of Wight Constabulary erected a cordon at a property in Beatrice Close, Binsted, near to Sherborne Avenue, where an assault allegedly took place previously. A police spokesman said, "We were called at 6:57 p.m. on Tuesday night to Sherborne Avenue following reports of an assault at an address. A man in his 40s was taken to hospital with injuries after it was reported that he'd been assaulted with a glass bottle by someone known to him. The injuries are not life-threatening. No arrests have been made at this time and inquiries remain ongoing.
Battle over birds. A new group has been formed to try to open Harbour Farm in Bembridge as a nature reserve and tourist attraction featuring bird hides, but the Environment Agency want to keep the land off limits to the public. The land was bought 10 years ago by the Environment Agency and is managed by the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds, RSPB. Previous owners, Ken and Deirdre Hicks, sold 420 acres of the farm to the RSPB in 1998, who wanted to create a sanctuary for wildlife after it was designated part of an EU special protection area. However, years later, Mr. Hicks said, the Environment Agency came back to us and said they wanted to raise the level of the river by 3 inches and ask if we would agree. Most of this land is 9 feet below high water spring tides. We said no, as it would become waterlogged. But we were told it was part of EU law. They said if we did not agree, they would compulsorily purchase us. We took legal advice and were told we would lose. Now, Andrew Holman has formed Harbour Farm Action Group, saying, since the Environment Agency bought the farm, it has gone to rack and ruin. They have now decided to demolish the farm buildings due to their lack of repair. They have also let the once beautiful and extensive gardens become overgrown with brambles. Gardens which contain unique Thornycroft apple trees amongst other delights. We are missing a huge opportunity for Bembridge to have a nature walk and bird hide at Harbour Farm. We understand that a recent survey commissioned by the Environment Agency looked at the current state of repair of the embankment. After listening to the views of local people, they suggested Harbour Farm had potential tourist and or public amenity improvements. We understand the document concluded with a promise to have continued community engagement with more detail on project specifics. Despite emails requesting involvement, the Environment Agency has excluded local people or bodies such as councils. They have apparently decided to demolish the buildings and leave the land to do nothing. Continued requests to look at the possibility of a nature walk visitor centre or bird hide have been ignored. Bembridge Councillor Joe Robertson said, I support looking at ways to allow the public to access some of the site for enjoyment and a better understanding of the variety of birds and special habitats that are flourishing there. This used to be a farm and family home until a few years ago, so we're not talking about an area where people have never been. Wildlife and special habitats benefit from a more informed public to take an active interest in preservation, and there are few better ways of improving public understanding than allowing people to come face to face with nature, particularly future generations. He added, I am also meeting the Environment Agency next week to discuss concerns about flooding along Moreton Road, and I will be raising the issue of access to Harbour Farm at the same time. Mr. Holman will be discussing the matter with Bembridge Parish Council on Wednesday and is organising a mass protest at the farm on Sunday, the 4th of February at 2 p.m. He has also started a petition aiming to get 500 signatures, which can be found at isleofwight.life Harbour Farm petition. The Isle of Wight Observer has been in discussions with the Environment Agency throughout the week, but it was unable to come back to answer our queries or provide a comment by the time we went to press.
Elderly health warning with cold snap on the way. There was much excitement this week when snow flurries were forecast. While most of November and December were warm and hit by large amounts of rain, temperatures have dropped this week. In addition, until January the 18th, a cold weather health alert is in place, issued by the National Met Office and the UK Health Security Agency. Earlier this week, colder climes prompted an ice warning from UK weather forecasters. Monday's alert also promised small amounts of snow, leading to slippery surfaces in a few places. In the end, it was the Bay Area that saw the biggest flurries, with some of the white stuff lying on roads and paths in Sandown, Lake and Shanklin for a short time. That had been forecast by the Isle of Wight Met Service, which warned of light snow flurries and sleet over the island's eastern and southeastern coasts. The current cold weather health alert tells us to expect sustained colder temperatures, which can adversely affect older people and those with underlying health conditions. Some areas could see the yellow Be Aware alert escalated to a more serious amber warning on Sunday. We will have the latest information and advice on our website at countypress.co.uk. Advice has been issued around how to keep warm, plug drafts in homes and stay healthy in colder weather. There are also early suggestions more snow could be heading for the south coast and central areas on Wednesday, the alert says. See pictures of this week's snowfall on page 27, and if you would like to share your wintry images with us, with a chance for it to be included online or in the paper, email editor@iwcp.co.uk.
Veterans invited to share their stories. An island school wants military veterans to spend time with their students and become role models for them. St. George's School in Watergate Road, Newport, is extending a warm welcome to those who have served in the British forces from across the island to come along and share their experiences and common interests. St. George's is a special school for young people aged 11 to 19 with severe and complex learning needs. School spokesperson Mike Sizer Green said, "Military veterans have a wealth of worldly experience. The intention would be for students to build positive relationships with community members, share common interests, talk about experiences, and for our volunteer military veterans to become a positive role model for identified students." As the only state secondary school on the island, we have a diverse range of needs running through our student population. At St. George's, we believe some of our students are now experiencing the effects of the recent pandemic and the impact of lockdowns. They have missed out on essential social interactions and experiences as a result. We have a small number of students experiencing challenges with their well-being, often communicated through behavior that can be difficult, alongside dysregulated emotional responses. Dysregulation is an inability to control emotional responses, which can lead to significant mood swings or changes in mood, which can include sadness, anger, irritability, and frustration. Recent studies involving volunteer military veterans in an other island school, veterans were able to express and reflect on values important to them and relayed to a younger generation. Military veteran volunteers stated that they benefited themselves by reminiscing to children about their service and described the positive effect it had on their mood and memory. Children taking part in that project showed real enthusiasm, with teaching staff noticing a real change in their attitude and attainment of participating pupils. When you become a volunteer at St. George's, you can expect to be treated like one of the school team. You will be provided with a warm space, a hot drink, and wonderful students to chat and learn with, added Mike. Veterans must be willing to undergo security vetting. Further information or details or have to register your interest, contact the school office on 524-634.
Hub Hope for Old Bank. A former Isle of Wight town centre bank could become a community hub and new home for a town council. Ryde Town Council, RTC, has said a deal has been agreed, in principle, to purchase the old NatWest building in St Thomas's Square for £426,000. If all goes to plan, it said it hopes to relocate from its current home on Lynn Street. Mayor Richard May told the County Press, "The NatWest building offers an opportunity to put the community right at the heart of Ryde. By purchasing the building, RTC will be able to provide the type of community hub that residents deserve, something that the current rented offices in Lynn Street do not allow." Clerk Lisa Dyer said the majority, if not all of the purchase, will be funded through the government's £20 million Town Board funding. In October 2023, Ryde was one of 55 towns across the country announced to be receiving the endowment-style funds. Initially, the purchase would be funded through the Public Works Loan Board, RTC said. The former NatWest Bank closed its doors in August. At the time, a significant decrease in footfall and a rise in mobile banking users was blamed. In November, it went on the market for £375,000. RTC said it was prudent for it to own its office space, rather than citing the example of Newport and Carisbrooke Community Council, which now resides in Newport High Street. As well as office space, RTC hopes the building will include fully functional toilets with accessible options, meeting rooms, rentable interview rooms, a hub and display space for Ryde community groups, a community information centre and a potential event space. RTC said the purchase is subject to a successful structural survey. Lisa Dyer said, "It is vital to note that this is an important step for both RTC and the town of Ryde. The council believes that this is a necessary, prudent move that will have genuine benefits for the community. A consultation about the purchase is currently being held and Ryde residents are invited to have their say. The link can be found at countypress.co.uk.
Fewer visitors, but higher spend. Fewer visitors came to the Isle of Wight last summer, but they spent more money with local businesses, the island's tourism boss has revealed. Around £280 million was forked out on the island by tourists between the 1st of October 2022 to the 30th of September 2023. Speaking at the Isle of Wight Council's Regeneration Scrutiny Committee, Visit Isle of Wight's Managing Director, Will Miles, said more than 1.96 million visitors came to the island during that period. Comparing it to 2019, the last year that was not impacted by the COVID pandemic, £275.8 million was spent on the island and 2.1 million tourists visited. Mr. Miles said, "The fact there was more spent but fewer visitors was the strange part of it all." He said it was a tourism board's goal to recover visitor numbers to pre-pandemic levels and also increase them. Visit Isle of Wight is now part of a national program which allows it to help shape tourism policy across Britain. Councillor Carl Love said the ferry fares needed to be made cheaper so more people would come to the island, especially when competing with cheaper flights to Europe. When comparing the island's tourism numbers with similar major coastal tourism destinations, Mr. Miles said, "We are sitting alongside a competitive set and doing okay. Overall, tourism equates to 30% of the island's economy," Mr. Miles said. One of the key issues the Tourism Board is working on is making the island more accessible for tourists with disabilities. Visit Isle of Wight will be working with the Hidden Disabilities Sunflower Charity and delivering training to island businesses on how to help people. It is also working with Ryde Town Council to provide accessible beach access in time for summer. Councillors asked what work was being done to extend the season and encourage businesses to be open in the off-season, as different audiences will come to the island at different times. Mr. Miles said holding walking festival outside of the peak season is helping to attract a new audience. He revealed a third of the island's tourists visit outside of the main summer season, which they were looking to increase, but also said attractions and hotels need to be open.
Drug deaths buck UK trend. New data shows there were fewer drug-related deaths on the Isle of Wight last year. It comes as drug deaths in England and Wales hit a record high, which calls for further investment in addiction services. Office for National Statistic figures show there were 10 drug poisoning deaths on the Isle of Wight in 2022, down from 16 the year before. The figure covers drug abuse and dependence, fatal accidents, suicides, and complications involving controlled and non-controlled drugs, prescription and over-the-counter medications. 8 of the deaths were identified as drug misuse. Some 2,261, 46%, deaths last year involved an opiate such as heroin or morphine, while 857 deaths involved cocaine, with the number rising for the 11th consecutive year. The ONS figures also show the age standardised mortality rate, which accounts for age and population size, stood at 9.7 drug-related deaths per 100,000 people on the island between 2020 and 2022. It was above the overall rate for England of 8.1 deaths per 100,000 people.
Lost their vote over lack of ID. 4 people were prevented from voting in a by-election last month, December, because they had no photo ID. On the 21st of December, Conservative Ed Blake secured 274 votes, with Labour's Steve Cooper, Mayor of Ventnor, finishing second with 248 votes. The Liberal Democrats' Ray Harrington Vale came in third place with 145 votes. Fewer than a quarter of those eligible to vote actually turned out, and 669 ballot papers out of a possible 2,987 were received, a 22.4% turnout. The Isle of Wight Council has revealed 10 people were refused a ballot paper due to having incorrect or no ID. Of those, 6 returned with documentation and went on to vote. In 2023, the government introduced a requirement for photo ID, saying it wanted to crack down on voter fraud. This was the second time it applied to an election on the Isle of Wight. The first was the by-election in Wootton Bridge in August. A valid photo ID can be your bus pass, passport, or driver's license, even if it has expired, as long as the photo looks like you.
Decrease in affordable homes built. Fewer affordable homes were built on the Isle of Wight last year, new figures show, despite numbers rising across England. Department for Levelling Up Housing and Community figures show 92 affordable homes were completed on the island in 2022-23, down from 126 during the same period the year before. The figures include social and affordable rental properties, affordable home ownership, shared ownership, and first homes. The number of social rent homes, however, has seen a fall in the last decade, with affordable rent now the most common housing for new supply. Social rental properties are for low-income families and typically cost about 50% of market rents, while affordable housing is provided to low-income earners and can be charged up to 80% of market rates. On the Isle of Wight, 65 affordable rent homes and 24 shared ownership dwellings were delivered. Across the country, there were 71,000 affordable dwellings started on site in 2022-23, with 35 of those on the island. More than 63,000 affordable homes were delivered across the country as of March 2023, the highest number since 2014-15, though a question mark hangs over whether this is adequate and an ambitious house building agenda is needed.
Sweeten up neighbours. Ryde Elim Pentecostal Church and Sundown Lighthouse Church delivered more than 700 boxes of chocolates to residents living near to both places of worship. Around 50 members of both congregations escorted for the Christmas around the streets of Ryde and Sundown, as they delivered the free gifts to hundreds of households. Interim Senior Pastor Ben Brown said, "At Christmas we celebrate the greatest gift ever given in the birth of Jesus. We like to celebrate that ourselves by giving a free gift of chocolate to our friends and neighbors. As churches, we try to show love to those around us, and what better way to do that than having some fun and giving presents at Christmas?" All the chocolates were provided by church members. Ryde Elim Church is based in Albert Street, Ryde, and meets at 10:30 each Sunday. Lighthouse Church is based in 4th Street, Sundown, and meets at 3 p.m. every Sunday.
Apology and payout to schoolgirl after failings. The Isle of Wight Council has apologised and must pay £3,250 for the distress caused to a mother and daughter over failings to support learning. In a recently published Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman (LGSCO) ruling, the watchdog said the council did not provide what it should have done to help the girl at school through her Education, Health and Care Plan, EHCP. For months, the lack of intervention left her without support in handwriting, literacy and numeracy skills, as well as in building emotional understanding, said the report. An Isle of Wight Council spokesman said, "We take the complaints about the services we provide very seriously and look to learn any lessons we can from the matters which go before the Ombudsman." In her complaint to the LGSCO, the mother, referred to as Ms. X, said the council's actions had caused avoidable distress and anxiety to both her and her daughter. There were issues ensuring consistent support in school from September 2022 through to March 2023, and Ms. X called for a meeting on multiple occasions, as well as for an emergency EHCP review, which sets out a child's extra needs and necessary support arrangements. The daughter's school said interventions had been taking place and it had been trying to recruit additional staff to help. It said a consultant had observed the child and was satisfied she was making progress. An EHCP review took place 4 months after one was first requested, by which point Miss X had already filed an official complaint with the council, the report said. Miss X said the council had left her daughter struggling at school. In its ruling, the LGSCO said although the council did have alternative measures in place, it did not secure all of the required services. The LGSCO also found the council had delayed reviewing the EHCP and did not respond to Ms. X in the statutory timeframe. Following the LGSCO report, the Isle of Wight Council has agreed to review the family's provision, so it is in line with the EHCP. It is also reminding staff of the statutory timeframes when it comes to requesting an EHCP review. Miss X told the LGSCO the impact of the council's actions was extreme stress and anxiety.
New restaurant has door smashed in. A police investigation is underway after a newly opened seafront restaurant was targeted by vandals. Paseo Tapas on Ride Esplanade has had its front door smashed. It is understood to have happened late on Tuesday night. Hampshire and Isle Constabulary confirmed it received reports of criminal damage at the seafront business at 11:45 p.m. Pictures show smashed glass strewn across the floor. The restaurant, which serves tapas, only opened last month, that is December. It is run by the owners of Union Street Deli, Pickle and Dill, Nicola, Daniel and Bob Wright. The family have joined forces with Jason Killingback from Cigar and Whistle Shop, Sip and Smoke in Victoria Arcade. Local food critics Matt and Kat recently gave the restaurant 4 of 5 stars. Anyone with information about the vandalism is asked to contact police on 101.
Did MP put party before Islanders? With the Isle of Wight deemed a dental desert, as no dentists accept new NHS patients, Isle of Wight MP Bob Seely has been accused of putting his career before the needs of Islanders. On Tuesday, alongside 295 other Tory MPs, Mr Seely voted against a Labour motion calling for an extra 700,000 emergency appointments and a scheme to recruit new dentists to areas most in need, leading to its defeat. Labour councillor Richard Quigley said, "Despite recent claims he has been working hard to find a solution to the dentistry crisis, Bob Seely and other Conservative colleagues voted down the motion, instead backing a government amendment that won't see any increase in NHS provision in the near future, and congratulates the government for the failures in dentistry to date. There can't be a single islander that isn't aware of the dire situation Island NHS dentistry is in," continued Councillor Quigley. Island dentists are pulling their hair out at the failure of government to remove the barriers to provide NHS dentistry. We are in the horrendous position of nearly 12 million people not being able to access an NHS dentist, with truth-related issues a leading cause of children going to A&E. It will come as little surprise to anyone that Bob Seely has made a lot of noise, but when faced with the opportunity to do something about it, puts his career before the needs of Islanders. I've written to Bob to ask his reasons for depriving Islanders of access to an NHS dentist. Hopefully, he will have time to reply in between trying to strip the Sussexes of their royal titles. A number of Conservative MPs attended and spoke in the debate, although Mr Seely did not. Only Conservative MPs voted for the government's amendment. The government regularly puts its MPs on a 3-line whip to oppose Labour motions, meaning they are under strict instruction to attend and vote to support the Conservative position.
Mum's mouldy, damp flat nightmare. The damp is making my kids ill. A recurring damp and mold nightmare for a family moved from one temporary home to another has left a mum crying every night and her young children with respiratory issues. The Isle of Wight Council has told County Press it would not knowingly use housing that is unfit for purpose, but admitted alternative accommodation is limited. The Isle of Wight family's nightmare began when a private landlord sold their Godsill home in May 2020. The council moved them into temporary accommodation in Sandown. But 3 months later, damp patches, condensation, and mold spores on furniture began to appear. The 42-year-old says she was told by her housing officer she was not opening enough windows. But despite taking the advice, she says the mold got worse and her children became ill. In 3 years, I went through 4 sofas because it was constantly wet and moldy. When my twins were in the pram, it was wet and moldy. The island woman says her calls for new accommodation took 3 years and claims the county hall only acted because she told them she had contacted the county press about her plight. It also cost her £500 to switch location, she said. As well as Sandown Councillor Jan Ward and Social Services, she contacted the Secretary of State for Housing, Michael Gove. A response from the government said damp and mold are not lifestyle issues, and cited the need to learn lessons after the death of Rochdale 2-year-old Awab Ishaq. In 2023, the family secured a move to a flat in Lake. Just 2 weeks later, her fresh start turned into a case of history repeating itself. A leak in the roof led to water dripping on her children's bed, leaving water stained on the walls. The living room and bedroom show evidence of mold and damp. My children are constantly coughing and sneezing and always off school and nursery, which meant I was off work. She told the county press, adding doctors advised inhalers, and school clothes were moldy. I can't go through it again, she said. It is a massive worry for how bad it is going to get and how quickly I used to cry every night. The stress has taken its toll and she has been signed off work. Although work to fix the leaky roof was promised and scaffolding was put up, no repairs have yet been carried out. The Isle of Wight Council says it is unable to comment on individual cases, but remains committed to resolving problems quickly when they do occur. A spokesperson said the local authority is not a landlord and cannot directly resolve issues, but we do try to support tenants to take up concerns directly with the property owner. We take issues seriously and will do all we can to assist, including pursuing a resolution directly with the landlord. Sadly, this can sometimes be challenging and take time, which we recognize is frustrating for the tenant and for us. The council says the choice of suitable accommodation can be limited, but insists it would not knowingly use housing that is unfit for purpose. The spokesperson said too many changes of accommodation can be unsettling, and multiple moves for households are only considered as a last resort. In addition, other alternatives, such as an offer of financial assistance to be able to source alternative private accommodation, are also explored.
Minimal impact of doctors' strike. Across England, the 6-day strike by junior doctors led to more than 110,000 patients having scheduled NHS care cancelled, but the industrial action had minimal impact on the island. Figures released by NHS England show that an average of 33 island staff took part in the stoppage each day, but no procedures were cancelled for 8 patients or inpatients at St Mary's Hospital, and no community care or mental health appointments had to be rearranged. Matthew Taylor, Chief Executive of the NHS Confederation Hospitals Group, has explained that trusts have preemptively avoided making appointments during periods of industrial action. The longest strike in the history of the NHS was the 10th by junior doctors since March, and is part of their campaign for better working conditions and to persuade the government that they should receive a 35% pay rise to compensate for a real terms drop of 26% in income since 2008. So far, the government has offered an average of 11.8%, which the British Medical Association, BMA, has dismissed and is now planning another ballot of its members, which could see industrial action continuing until September. On Wednesday, during Prime Minister's questions, Rishi Sunak claimed that other NHS staff, including consultants and specialist doctors, had reached a pay settlement. However, the BMA said that they are balloting both groups on whether they accept the government's offers. Further strike action by both groups of doctors has not been ruled out. Last Friday, Health Secretary Victoria Atkins said to the Junior Doctors Committee, "The moment you call off the strikes, I'll get back around the table with you within 20 minutes. The Isle of Wight NHS Trust was contacted for a comment.
Now we turn to white memories and nostalgia. All go in the swinging 60s. This month, we go back to the 1960s with a second look at the oddities and quirky items that used to appear under the heading Island Notes. In April 1965, the Beatles released their new single, Ticket to Ride. Councillors at Ride wondered if there was any publicity to be had from what they assumed was just a coincidence or wordplay. The county press reported, "The Beatles may have unknowingly helped to publicize Ride as a holiday resort this summer with their latest record, Ticket to Ride, which is currently number 1. At a meeting of Ride Town Council on Tuesday, Mr. R.V. Bourne said there was a first-class opportunity to use a play on the title in their national advertising. One of his suggestions was, why not take a ticket to Ride this summer? Well, had the councillors known it, the title was actually a very deliberate reference to Ride. McCartney's cousin, Beth, and her husband, Mike, happened to run Beau Bars on Union Street Ride, and he and Lennon had in fact bought several tickets to Ride by that time, beginning in 1960. As McCartney revealed in his book Many Years From Now, Lennon was taken with the punning potential of the phrase, leading him to use it as a title. Islanders certainly had a healthy appetite in those days. In July 1965, the county press reported, Visitors to the country fair at Shalfleet on Thursday disposed of 2 whole roasted sheep, 500 sausages, 500 rolls, and 32 loaves of bread in 2.5 hours. In July 1966, a little bit of the mainland came to Newport. On Monday, a set of traffic signals at St. James Square was switched on. These lights and an other set, which came into operation at the same time in South Street, Newport, are the first road junction traffic lights to be installed on the island. The only others of a similar nature are the signals controlling sideline traffic over the road bridge at Yarmouth, installed 30 years ago. In September 1966, Benji, a budgerigar, made headlines. Benji the budgerigar, a prolific talker and pet of Miss Pam Triscott of Seaview, escaped last week. Nothing further was heard until the Chase Police Constable advised his owner that he had been picked up at Chale, somewhat exhausted and hungry after a flight of about 15 miles. In September 1967, colour television arrived. A chance to see it at an open day at the BBC's Roe Ridge transmitter attracted a huge number of visitors. A 2-mile queue of cars stretched from the road to the transmitter at Roe Ridge to the top of Carisbrooke when an open day was held at the station. More than 5,000 visitors in 3,000 cars came to view the facilities, and particularly colour television. Many waited an hour in their cars and queued for another half an hour to enter the buildings.
In April 1968, Tim Medland, 11, of Noak Farm, Parkhurst, had a shock when he picked up what he thought was a grass snake. Grass snake was an adder, read the headline. Tim will not touch a grass snake in a hurry again, for the one he tried to catch in Parkhurst Forest on Sunday afternoon turned out and bit his thumb. It was then he realised it was an adder. He obtained a lift to St Mary's Hospital, where he received 7 injections to combat the venom. Tim leaves hospital tomorrow after a week under observation. A 12-week gun amnesty in May 1968 produced some surprising results. A bizarre assortment of 61 guns and about 1,000 rounds of rifle and revolver bullets represents the island response to a 3-month firearms amnesty. Inspector Hoare showed the county press the weapons. They include 22 shotguns, 14 rifles, 9 revolvers, 7 pistols and 3 air guns. The most interesting weapon was a rifle made by J. Stevens, stamped Cherokee Falls, April 1794. In June 1969, it was last orders for a Newport pub. Patrons of Mews Prince Regent Public House in High Street, Newport, had their final drink there last Friday. The house is to be demolished in connection with the Coppins Bridge roundabout development. It was a sad occasion for the licensees, Mr. and Mrs. Lawrence. They are moving to the Plough Inn, Node Hill, and accompanying them will be their parrot, Bobby, who sits outside his cage and is an avid television viewer. 4 months later, the brewing of beer at Newport also came to an end. No more would Mews Ale be a part of island life, and no more would the townspeople of Newport wake up to the heady, promising smell of yeast and hops in the air on brewing days. Mews, in existence for more than 300 years, bowed to the needs of economy when the Royal Brewery, Crocker Street, Newport, produced the last ever batch of beer. The company will still employ 90 at the brewery. And on that note, cheers.
Opinions. Thank you all, the GNS fraternity. During the Christmas period, I had the enjoyable experience of watching on to HMS Pinafore, always my favorite of Gilbert and Sullivan operettas, possibly because it has a heroine called Josephine, and so did I, until her death. In other works, Gilbert makes fun of police, politicians, the law, the stage, and poets of the Oscar Wilde school. And in Pinafore, it is a turn of the Royal Navy and how democratization might help or hinder, with such swipes at Sir Joseph Porter, KCB, who puts forward the view that love can level all ranks, so long as it suits his book. I can't enjoy music so much as I used to because of my deafness, and one of the unavoidable effects of living longer than humans have evolved for, but enough of Sullivan's music gets through to me still to cheer me up, and the dancing, lights, and Gilbertian logic still tickles the funny bone. Subtitles help, of course. Incidentally, don't you feel sorry for the unfortunate whose job it is to put a news reader's spoken words into text? I get the impression two people are doing it, the second correcting the first errors. That Pinafore was great, and not us shattering. On another occasion, Josie and I, and millions of others simultaneously, were awestruck by theatrical performances, and another was witnessed by only 100 or 2. The most recent of these events happened on the 30th of June, 1994, and many of you have got it already. In a 10-minute interval in the Eurovision Song Contest, hosted by Ireland, a large troupe of Irish dancers gave the performance of their lives. And in offices and pubs all over the world, the conversation was about river dance, not the contest. The other big event took place on the 14th of February 1984. How many clues do you need? Sarajevo, Ravel's Bolero, Tove Lindin. For the smaller occasion, I may be the last surviving witness. In about 1946, I was taken to the Hippodrome in Stockton to see my first Savoy opera, The Pirates of Penzance, the first such after the war, and heard enthusiastic amateurs giving their all for their first time in 6 years. I knew much of the music as my parents had been members of a similar group. But seeing it with the lights full on, inside and out, was a new experience for me. Thank you all, the worldwide Gilbert and Sullivan fraternity.
Sarah Morris, former sub-postmaster at the Strand Post Office in Ryde. Mr. Bates versus the Post Office has brought attention and public support to the sub-postmasters who lost so much in the Horizon scandal. For many years they have been shouting as loudly as they could, fighting a system and an establishment pitted against them in every way. The protections that should have been in place to protect those innocent people completely failed them. As a former postmaster, I empathise with their frustration and confusion. They were told they were personally liable for any deficits because the post office was adamant that the Horizon computer system could not be wrong. We sub-postmasters were told we must be at fault and had to reimburse the post office for any shortfall out of our wages and takings. Now that we know that Fujitsu staff had remote access to accounts, I believe all deficits, no matter how small, should be investigated. Money was taken fraudulently and with threats from, as Toby Brown playing Alan Bates so succinctly put it, the skint little people. I do not believe any sub-postmaster went into the role intending to steal from the post office. You were somebody people would come to for advice or a friendly chat. You were trusted. Nobody would have accepted as a sub-postmaster unless they were reasonably proficient in paperwork and mathematics, and many had been successfully using the paper method for years. It was only when Horizon was introduced that problems arose. I only had a single terminal, but I experienced problems with Horizon and had to repay small deficits from time to time. I remember long evenings struggling to try to make the figures balance and understand what could possibly have gone wrong. But it was sub-postmasters with more than one terminal that really suffered. The public are now paying attention to this biggest miscarriage of justice in British history. But should it really be a TV programme that shone a light on the many shortcomings of the government, the post office and Fujitsu? What were our politicians doing? The Horizon scandal unfolded under Labour and Conservative governments and Lib Dem leader Sir Ed Davey, when he was Post Office Minister, refused to even meet Alan Bates. Former Post Office boss Paula Venables has finally bowed to public pressure and handed back her CBE. When will he hand back his knighthood? Why didn't these politicians see a problem when many trusted members of local communities, previously pillars of society, were being repeatedly prosecuted? Surely common sense alone should have told those elected to represent us that all these local sub-postmasters were not criminals. More than 20 years of devastation which destroyed the lives and dreams of hundreds of innocent people could have been avoided if politicians had really listened, cared and acted. One aspect of the ITV drama really struck a chord with me. That was how much of a massive insight you got into people's lives, what they feel is important and how they think things should change. I know that 20 years ago people wanted the same things we want now. Lower taxes, better schools, a well-functioning NHS. Nothing's got better. In fact, things are far worse. Everybody knows what needs to be done, but nobody is doing it. I was proud to run a small post office which gave me a chance to help the people who lived around me, and that experience was one of the things that persuaded me it is time to take a stand. I'm not a politician, but I am standing as a candidate for Reform UK in the next general election to give ordinary islanders a voice. It is finally time for the establishment to take notice of skint little people.
Public information. Police leading truancy sweep in school areas. As we start a new year and return to work after the festive break, it is probably difficult for many of us to remember our school days and not too dissimilar sentiments over returning to school after the Christmas holidays. For so many reasons, school is important to our society, as it offers the educational opportunities for our young people to go on and achieve their ambitions in life. As a police officer, it concerns me when young people are not in school when they should be. It begs the question, if they are not in school and their parents or guardian is not aware of their absence, where are they? What are they doing? And who are they with? Apart from the obvious loss of education and chances that they are missing out on, policing experience tells me truanting places young people at increased risk of harm. This could be through engaging in antisocial behavior or criminality, either as a victim or as a perpetrator. There is a parental responsibility to encourage school attendance, and local authorities should be there to assist also. On the island, we're looking at this issue with our partners to address it longer term. Sergeant Ben Charlen has been leading our neighborhood teams in a truancy sweep in all areas that have secondary schools. This action is authorized under the Crime and Disorder Act of 1998 and gives police officers and PCSOs the power to take truant children to a designated safe location during school hours. Once at a designated location, our partners from the Education and Inclusion Service can engage with the child and their family to address the reasons for their truancy. The sweep requires consultation and support from our partners at the Education and Inclusion Service, and also requires the authority of a police superintendent. The sweep is not designed to criminalize young people or parents, but to safeguard them and identify what can be done to ensure their attendance at school. You can read more on the importance of school attendance at isleofwight.gov.uk, Schools and Education, School Attendance. This is not a one-off operation. We will continue to work with the Education and Inclusion team and the Community Safety Partnerships at Isle of Wight Council to break these links and keep young people safe.
What's on? Pride 2024 lines up Pussycat Doll. Pop icon and former member of the Pussycat Dolls, Kimberly Wyatt, has been announced as a headliner at Isle of Wight Pride 2024. Organisers have been announcing the list of headliners for the event between July the 19th to the 21st in Ryde. Kimberly Wyatt will be bringing her DJ set to the main stage at Harbour Beach on Saturday, July the 20th. Last year, the Grammy-nominated artist performed her DJ set at the Isle of Wight Festival's Electro Love Tent. In August, she visited the island again and enjoyed trips to Blackgang Chine and Monkey Haven. Joining Kimberly on Saturday will be RuPaul's Drag Race UK Season 5 winner, Ginger Johnson. BBC Radio 1 presenter Dean McCullough will headline the Friday night Isle of Wight Pride launch party at the balcony at Esplanade Pavilion. The Pride Plus event, taking place on Sunday, will include Symphonics Pride, a production featuring a 30-piece orchestra and band, with Andrew Browning as George Michael and Dave Jerome as Freddie Mercury. Tickets go on sale at the end of the month.
West End on the Apollo screen. Hit London and West End Theatre will be screened at the Apollo Theatre in Newport. The 130-seat venue has joined National Theatre Live to broadcast some of London's West End shows. There will be 8, starting with James Graham's hit play, Dear England, on the 25th of January, which depicts the journey of England men's football manager Gareth Southgate, played by Joseph Fiennes, from his Euro 96 penalty miss to leading the team to success in recent years. This will be followed by Vania, Simon Stevens' radical new version of Anton Chekhov's play, starring Andrew Scott on February the 22nd. Jeannie O'Reilly, spokesperson for the Apollo Theatre, said, "National Theatre Live is a really exciting treat to bring to theatre lovers on the island. The ambience of our beautiful theatre Newport is just right for these kind of productions, and you will always have the best seat in the house without having to catch a ferry. Tickets via Apollo's website."
Letters. Bob Seeley, Isle of Wight MP. Councillor Jonathan Bacon says I have not been in contact about the mess that the so-called Alliance group of councillors are making of the island's primary school planning. I wrote to the then leader of the Alliance Council, Laura P.C. Wilcox, in August 2023. She said in her letter to me, "I don't disagree that the situation on the island is critical, particularly as government funding for schools is linked directly to pupil numbers attending schools." She also said, "I'm also acutely aware that this situation is very concerning to head teachers, school governors, parents and children." I thank Laura for her honesty and straight talking. I wish more of her Alliance councillors had her common sense. Talking with head teachers, it is clear little has changed. Councillor Jonathan Bacon is not doing the right thing. The feeling among teachers is that Alliance councillors are wasting time. We do not need more consultation. Teachers have worked hard to give their recommendations already. This shilly-shallying is financially disruptive, and schools need to focus on education, not on damaging battles over which schools will close. The Alliance must grip this situation now, not after the council election. These councillors are delaying decisions because they are putting their political careers before children's education. I will happily work with this group of councillors, or indeed anyone, for the good of the island, but not when they do the wrong thing. I will be writing to all Alliance councillors next week to urge action now and urge that they listen to the experts, the island's senior teachers.
Money down the drain. A letter by Ken Summer. Dear editor, 9 billion of unrecovered pandemic fraud, 2 billion spent on Rwanda for a reciprocal immigration deal that has yet to see a single person expelled from the UK, and 8 million a week to accommodate asylum seekers in hotels. 30 billion wasted for absolutely nothing, courtesy of 160,000 conservatives who voted for a leftist to lead our country. But fear not. Inflation has come down to 3.9%. Hang on. That means it's still rising. The cost of everything, food, energy, mortgages, etc., has shot through the roof. What's the answer? Hit welfare, because, as every Tory knows, the British are amongst the worst idlers in the world. So can all you slackers out there pull your fingers out and get back to work? Thank you.
Abandoned ship. Graham Rowlandson Ride. I was amazed that at second reading of the Safety of Rwanda Bill, a the Small Boats Bill, MPs were using nautical terms. Mark Francois said he wanted to make the bill more watertight, and our own Bob Seely told the BBC that Tory MPs have to row together. Now the bill is at committee stage, someone will hopefully have the sense to shout, "Abandon ship."
Star Letter, Hooray for Easy Way, by Harry Arcos of Ryde. Dear Editor, like most people, I tend to regularly buy the same items from Sainsbury's, and more often than not, notice that the price has increased. A white baguette jumping in price from 80 pence a year or so to £1.20 last week. It was therefore a nice surprise to pick up an ingredient for curry from Easyway in Pyle Street, Newport, and discover that it was exactly the same price as it was when I last purchased it about 3 months ago. And it was fresh stock. I do not have a photographic memory, but Easyway have price stickers on the items, and their older pack was still in the cupboard. Both Marks & Spencer's and Tesco announced today that they had raised their profit forecast, while Sainsbury's have projected their profits for their year will reach £690 million. I suspect this has more to do with inflated prices than volume of sales. So well done, Easyway, for only increasing prices when you really have to, rather than following the supermarkets and upping prices to as much as you think you can get away with. By the way, the similar product for curry in Sainsbury's is 50 pence more.
Goodbye from Mary.
Goodbye from Gerard.
The BBC In Touch programme follows, and the Scaffolding News follows that.
BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Good evening. Even the mildest mannered of visually impaired people can be reduced to impotent fury by this.
Yosie and I have just left the house. We've already come to a stop. Yosie's taking me up to the side of the road as there's a car on the pavement, which is very common. Forward, over, and now in the middle of the road. There's quite a bit of noise down here, so I can't hear if there's any cars coming. It's coming down dark, so it's even scarier because I have no useful vision at all during the dark. Good girl. It is just absolutely exasperating. Forward. Good girl. Good girl.
Now, there was some excitement back in 2019 when we were able to announce that Scotland was to be the first home country to make parking on pavements a statutory offence nationwide, and that drivers breaking the rules could be subject to fines of up to £100. At last, many of you told us, because this has been a problem since, well, ever since motor vehicles and pedestrians were expected to coexist. And yet only now is the Scottish Act coming into force, and already we're hearing about some of the Scottish local authorities who've been given the powers to enforce it, pushing back on the amount of work involved and the cost of enforcing it. Still, at least Scotland is doing something about it, and in a moment we'll be hearing from the Transport Minister about the differences she's hoping it'll make. First though, Lynn Hetherington, whose voice we heard at the top of the programme as she struggled to navigate the roads around where she lives on the outskirts of Glasgow. Lynn, I mean, first of all, tell us a bit more about the hazards cars and other vehicles pose for you.
Well, on my daily life, it is a struggle. We come across cars on the pavement at least 4 or 5 times a day, and that's just in our local area without going into Glasgow. My guide dog, she goes to the side of the kerb when she comes to a car and there's no space to get down the inside. Now, she will take me off the pavement and I don't have any distance vision whatsoever. So I don't know if it's a number of cars or just the one. So I'm going off the kerb with her help. But the scary part of it is you don't know if you're going to be meeting a car or if there's going to be a car come up behind you. You just have to take your chances as far as that's concerned.
And have you had particularly bad experiences?
Yes, my husband's a guide dog owner as well. We did have one bad experience where we had to come off the pavement, but it wasn't for one car, it was for probably about 10 to 12 cars. There was a local football match on and the cars were all up on both sides of the road and we had no option. We couldn't even cross the road to go another pavement. So that was actually quite scary. And one of the other times I had was actually when I was walking down the road, the van crossed in front of me and went onto the pavement. And if that wasn't bad enough, it decided to start reversing.
Can I ask you, do you ever challenge the people who put these vehicles in your path?
My husband, he challenges people, and he had one where he came off the kerb, had to go past this van that was completely on the pavement, and the person inside was actually sitting having their lunch. So my husband tackled him and the man came out of the van and started verbally abusing my husband, who walked off at that point, didn't want any more confrontation than that. So yes, we do get confrontation from people who think that it's okay to do what they're doing.
Now, I'm sure you're pleased that something at least is happening in Scotland, but I think you're still concerned about how quickly this will come into force. The council in your area, Glasgow City, has said,
in line with Transport Scotland guidance, we are undertaking a full assessment of footway parking throughout the city to help us establish if it would be appropriate to exempt any streets from the pavement parking ban. Once our footway assessment is complete, a report will be put before committee in due course.
Lynn, how confident does that make you feel?
That actually makes me feel as if I'm back to square one because I'm a lot in the city centre. It's usually bigger vehicles, so it's longer spaces, but you don't come off the kerb there as nobody would walk up a street in the middle of Glasgow. So you need to actually backtrack, you need to find a crossing, you need to go up the other side of the road and then find another crossing to get back and double back. People are reasonable. We understand that there are places that this is not going to manage to happen, but to have to think that they're starting that now, you're talking another year or 2 years before they get finished.
OK, stay with us. Listening to that has been the Scottish Transport Minister, Fiona Hislop. Minister, thanks for coming on. How soon do you think it'll be before Lynn, can walk her streets more confidently?
Well, I agree that pavement parking needs to end. It's unfair, it's unsafe, and it's been illegal in Scotland since 2019. Now, remember, the Transport Act came in November 2019, just before the pandemic. Since then, obviously, we've tried to make sure all the different regulations have been brought in. There was a disruption to that timescale, but the exemption you've been talking about, the powers for councils to exempt, have been in place for some time, and it'll be up to individual councils who know their streets better than clearly a central government to understand which ones they can exempt or should exempt and which not to. I'm very pleased that Edinburgh City Council have taken a lead. They've already put forward their proposals to the relevant council committee and will be enforcing the new powers which we brought into effect in December last year to have the ability to fine people who are parking illegally. And they're bringing their powers into force practically from the end of this month. But
Lynn's point was, shouldn't this work about which Glasgow and many other councils have been talking, shouldn't they have been carried out back in 2019 rather than waiting for the full enforcement of this act last month?
So I'm the Transport Minister for Scotland. We brought forward, I think, groundbreaking legislation that enables local authorities right across the country to tackle pavement parking. They'll all perhaps do it in a different way, but they're all on that journey to make sure that that can happen. Some are ahead of others, but it's not my job as a government minister to make councils and enforce them to use powers which they have the responsibility to carry out. But I think it's really important that we try and raise awareness more generally about the issue of pavement parking. And that is why we're also embarking on a nationwide communications campaign using social media, using radio advertising to try and alert people to this issue.
Pavement parking is unsafe, unfair and illegal, and you could be fined up to £100 for it. Find out more and about exemptions at roadsafety.scot.
Isn't this, though, a bit about, you mentioned the fines, but this is about money as far as actually doing the work, isn't it? If I can just quote you a couple of the other councils which have made this kind of point. Inverclyde Council pointed us to a report from a meeting of their Environmental and Regeneration Committee, which says enforcement will not be possible in Inverclyde without the necessary funding and resources for implementation and management, including the promotion of exemption orders. And they need to go through detailed assessments first to see what's required. And Scottish Borders Council said, like most other Scottish local authorities, we're awaiting word from Transport Scotland on further funding opportunities to be made available to fund the enforcement of the new bill. The council will not be in a position to carry out enforcement of the new transport bill for the time being. Minister, is there going to be money for them?
So the councils have been given £2.4 million to do the work that you've been talking about, which has been about the exemption side of things, and they've had the funding to enable them to do that. I can't speak for Borders Council, I can't speak for Inverclyde Council, but I can speak for the people of Scotland. The reason that this pavement parking ban was brought in was increasingly members of the Scottish Parliament were receiving complaints and concerns by, yes, people who've got visual impairments, but also those people that have got double buggies or single buggies, or older people walking with dogs, or a whole variety of people, wheelchair users, who want to be able to use their pavements and to do so in a safe way. And that is why we brought this forward. That is the correct responsibility of the Scottish Government. But we also respect councils and the powers and responsibilities they have. But I am absolutely convinced that they will be approached by their own constituents in their own areas, demanding that they move faster and with more purpose, like Edinburgh Council, who will be bringing in the full powers by the end of January.
But just to stay with that point, if it's a nationwide ban on pavement parking, which it is, shouldn't it perhaps be funded by the nations? You know, because, I mean, we know that hard-pressed local authorities are.
So we have already provided funding for the initial work on the exemptions. We are in discussion with COSLA, who are the representative bodies of the councils, to identify what additional support they need to have to help support that rollout. But there has to be a political will here. And if you believe that our pavements should be safe spaces for people, if you believe in fairness in our society, and if you as a council want to serve all of your community, then you will do what Edinburgh Council has done, and you will take forward this and implement this. So yes, we can provide enabling powers nationally, which is what we've done, but I would appeal to everybody to think about the type of country, the type of society we want, and I want one where everybody can have access to their pavements. We can all benefit from that ban on pavement parking.
Let me just finally quickly go back to Lynn Hetherington. You've got the Minister's ear. What would you like to see happen now?
Well, by listening, it sounds as if, yes, it's been passed, yes, you support it, but it doesn't sound as if the enforcement is something that is going to go any quicker than it has been since 2019. And it's the safety of lots of people that are using the pavements, as you say.
Final response to that, Minister?
Well, there was no movement before 2019 and not until we've got the penalties brought in December. So I'm perhaps more hopeful than Lynn. I do think that if she hasn't already done so, she'll be contacting her local councillor to see what they can do to ensure that pavement parking in her part of Scotland can be implemented as quickly as it is in the city of Edinburgh.
We may have to invite you both on again to see how it is going. Lynn Hetherington and Scotland's Transport Minister Fiona Hislop, thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Meanwhile, in other parts of the UK, I think I can hear some blind and partially sighted people saying, well, at least Scotland is doing something. Although there are some parking bans notionally in place in England, in London, for example, there doesn't seem to be much taking place in the way of enforcement. I'm joined now by Mike Bell, who's the Thomas Pocklington Trust's Head of Public Affairs and Campaigns. Mike, just last week you've reinforced a campaign, I think that's been running for some time. We know the issues, as we've heard what's happening, albeit more slowly than they'd like in Scotland. What are you calling for?
What we're calling for, Peter, is the government to get on and introduce legislation to ban pavement parking in England. It's 4 years now since they first ran a consultation on taking action on pavement parking. And we think it's just beyond time for a really clear and simple law that says pavement parking should be banned. The presumption should be that it's not allowed. And then we would encourage the government to go down the line of giving councils the power to introduce pavement parking by exception, but not by the norm. So it would give the flexibility to local councils, but the simple policy would be no pavement parking allowed in England.
So in other words, you accept that there are narrow roads, you accept that there are some circumstances where you need to be sure emergency vehicles can get through, but you want the presumption to be that you don't park on the pavement.
Exactly right. You know, we all recognise that there are some streets and some locations where pavement parking has got to be permitted. But what we want is for that to be the exception, not the norm.
You said 4 years, but you'll know that campaigns like yours have been running now for... well over 50 years. I mean, I started working on this programme in the 70s and it was one of the first things that I remember trying to cover. Yeah, in particular, the campaign of the National Federation of the Blind. How do you think you can succeed where none of the others did?
Well, in fairness, we'll give the government some credit that after, you're exactly right, decades of campaigning on this issue by a huge range of organisations, the government did finally consult. The Department for Transport ran their consultation back in 2020. And all we're asking for now is for them to just move it on to the next stage. So publish the results of the consultation and then introduce the legislation as they said they were going to do. And now's the time for the government to act. So we are asking people to write to their MPs and to the Secretary of State for Transport, Mark Harper, and just ask them to get on with it.
Well, we invited Mark Harper on. We were told he wasn't available for interview, although we did get this statement from the department. They say everyone should be able to navigate their streets without obstacles. And while local authorities already have powers to prohibit it through local regulation, we have consulted, as you've said there, on further helping them to take action. The response to this will be published in due course. It's always a slightly alarming phrase, in due course, because you don't know how due course is, do you?
No, absolutely. I mean, I think that our message is really clear. This is really a simple, straightforward piece of legislation. This is not complicated. We've got an existing model in Scotland. As you mentioned earlier, there are other parts of England where there are private acts of parliament that have restricted pavement parking. We just need a clear law to be introduced and they need to get on with it now.
So just to remind people what this is really about, we're also joined by Dave Smith. He's an engagement manager for one of the Trust's sight loss councils. Dave, I think you've had not one but two close encounters with dangerously parked vehicles in the last few months.
Yeah, I have. I come across parked vehicles every day I go out. One that kind of, I guess it sticks in my mind quite a lot because it hurt, was I was walking out just around my local area, a very familiar area that I walk. I'm a long cane user, and I walked straight into a scaffold pole that was sticking out the back of a scaffolding truck. Initially, it's that, ouch, a few expletives, I guess. And then it's like, where am I? why have I just walked into something so sharp and hard? And I realised that it was a truck that had parked completely on the pavement, blocking the pavement.
How much damage did it do to you?
Well, I wear sunglasses, just to try and block out some of the glare from the sun. But it bent the glasses and it burst the top of my nose open and kind of bruised my ego. From my point of view as a blind person navigating, it just adds the additional kind of anxiety. I don't walk as quickly because I'm now anticipating that something's going to be in my way. And it shouldn't be the case.
So you've lost confidence, have you? Sounds as if you were probably quite a confident traveller.
I think I still am a confident traveller, and it takes quite a lot to knock me back. But, I've walked into the back of a truck before. I've walked into the back of an open boot before. Every time it's where your cane is on the ground and it's detecting stuff on the floor and your face detects the stuff higher up. But it does knock your confidence. It certainly does. And it would quite easily put people off going out on their own.
Dave Smith, Mike Bell, thank you both very much for coming on. Just to say, as for Wales and Northern Ireland, well, Wales, a consultation was proposed for 2023. It's now been postponed until this year. Northern Ireland has conducted a consultation. They're waiting for a minister to be in place to make a decision based on its findings. And that's it for today. As for next week, though, we'd like to hear in this election year from any visually impaired people thinking of standing for whatever party in the inevitable general election. Do let us know if you're running or you know of someone else who's considering it. You can email in touch at bbc.co.uk or leave a voice message on 0161 836 1338 or visit our website bbc.co.uk/in-touch. From me, Peter White, producer Beth Hemmings, and studio managers Carwyn Griffith and Simon Highfield, goodbye.
Scaffolding and skip news, week commencing the 15th of January 2024. Newport area, Key House, Key Street, 36 Caesars Road and 7 High Street. Ryde area, Nationwide, 3 St Thomas's Square, Cross Street. Overbank, Upper Green Road, St Helens, and 2 St Thomas's Square. Cowes area, 119A High Street. Cowes area skips, 24 Thetis Road, Cowes. East Cowes area, the Barracks, Guardhouse, Albany Road, Ferry Road, Castle Street. Ventnor area, Cliffview, Hamborough Road, 2 East Street, St John's Flats, 4 Trinity Road, Boots Chemist, High Street. Shanklin area, 73 Regent Street. Freshwater area, Blackbridge House, Blackbridge Road.